Welcome to Fit After 40. Today we have Patrick Rizzo on. Patrick is a four-time Olympic marathon trials qualifier and is placed in the top 10 in U.S. championships ranging from 8 kilometers to marathon distances. Some of those accomplishments include 10th place in the Chicago Marathon, 11th place in the London Marathon, and 8th place finish in the Pan American Games. Patrick is also able to run a 2:13 marathon. Welcome to Fit After 40. How are you doing, Patrick?
Welcome.
Doing overall pretty well.
Well, it's good to see you again.
Great to see you as well. I feel inferior, like I need to be running for office now, and I'm just not ready yet.
Well, I think you would actually be a great candidate, and I think you've actually tried that a little bit in the past, and maybe that we'll get to that in a little bit when we talk about what you're planning in your post racing career. Maybe that's the kind of races you're going to start running in the future. Look forward to seeing that happen. Uh, let's just kind of start off a little bit here. Tell me your story. Tell our listeners your story. How did you get to running at the level you run now?
So I didn't start out running. Running was actually a second love. I actually grew up wrestling. I come from a wrestling family. My father wrestled, my brother wrestled. I wrestled from second grade through high school. And my sophomore year of high school, I actually went partially deaf. Actually, I went completely deaf for about 2 years. Lost my hearing, lost my equilibrium, and without balance, you are not a very good wrestler, if you can believe that. So I turned to my second sport, which was running. And at that point, it was somewhat of a psychological escape from the fact that I couldn't hear anything. I mean, I will say I'm not somebody very prone to depression, but I think everybody goes through depression. I don't think necessarily everyone has it, but everyone can experience it. And that was definitely an experience of depression for me, and running got me through that. So with that, I developed a real strong love for running. Um, I progressed through that. I turned out to be a pretty decent runner in high school, not great, but decent. Wound up all state in Illinois. Come college, I went to North Central College in Naperville, Illinois. Was an All American there 8 times. And when I graduated into the recession. So, I'm 40. So graduated into the recession. Um, was looking at what I wanted to do and didn't really like the traditional job route at that point in time. I wanted to pursue what I could do to my fullest in one thing in life. And that for me was running. So I got involved with a group out of Michigan called Hanson's and spent about 3.5 years there, qualified for my first Olympic trials there before realizing the entire upper Midwest just depressed me and I wanted out. Uh, so I moved to Colorado sight unseen when I was 26 years old and showed up, lived in Boulder with a friend of a friend. And that worked out for a long period of time. Then met my wife here, got married, continued racing. The rest is history. Now I'm just an old man.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I guess kind of getting at, so you started competing at the elite level though. When did you really start doing that? And what's it kind of like to compete at that level? Most of us that listen to this podcast or are middle-aged and we've never kind of had that experience. It's got to be a little bit different.
Me, I'm mostly just racing the gut here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only difference is I'm middle aged and I have that experience, but we're all middle aged. So I think you misidentified me there. But no, it's definitely a fun experience. I'm glad I went through it. It's not as glamorous in running as you would think with some other sports. So, there's a lot of Super 8 motels, a lot of Motel 6s in my history here. But at the same time, I've gotten to see a lot of the world. I've gotten to see Britain, I've gotten to see Australia, I've gotten to see Japan, I've gotten to see Mexico, Canada. My passport has a lot of stamps, and none of it was on my dime. So that was a fun experience to be able to do. It's definitely exciting to be able to push your body to a limit in one thing at one point in your life, and that's something I will never regret having done. But yeah, again, it's not as glamorous as you might think, Tony.
So I'm curious, I know that through, like you say, it's not a glamorous life being a professional runner at all, to the point where it's a profession, much like being a small town mayor, where you need to have another job along the way. So I know that most of the time you've never survived off of running marathons. You've done other stuff besides that. And given that, most professional athletes, we think, well, they have all day to train and stuff like that. Well, professional runner, given the circumstances, probably doesn't have all day to train. So what does your training look like? And have you fit that in over the years, balance that with another job and so on? And just kind of what's the average training day look like for someone at your level?
So when I was peaking, training was, I'd wake up at 6 a.m. I've always been up fairly early. 6 a.m. would be the latest I generally had ever gotten to wake up. So 6 a.m. I'd wake up, do my breakfast routine, and then I always preferred training with a group. I'm not very good solo. I'm a very competitive person. I'm not a very talented person. So I would go meet the group, usually either 8 or 9 o'clock, depending on the group that I was meeting with. So when I was in Michigan, it was usually earlier. When I was in Colorado, people here don't get up very early. Go out. Morning run is generally the bigger workout. So on average, I would get about 20 miles a day in, and that would be sometimes single runs, sometimes doubles. So if it's a workout day, so a day where it's something of substance, it would be interval workouts that usually would total about 20 miles. But yeah, easy days would be, 12 miles in the morning, 8 in the afternoon, or 14 in the morning, 6 in the afternoon. It's definitely changed as I've gotten older. You don't recover quite the same. And also, I think the stored workload is super valuable. What you've done when you're younger is stored in the muscle memory, and you are able to tap into that a lot more. You don't need to keep building the bank.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that's interesting.
Well, I was going to ask about recovery. If you're doing a lot of two-a-days, how many recovery days are you giving yourself? What are you doing on those recovery days? Are you still going out and taking a hike, or tell me about that part of your training?
More than you know, I would go out for hikes. And that's actually kind of a secret third workout that was always in my day, was especially in my Colorado time here. So really my prime. I would go out, do that morning workout. Actually backtracking, you asked about how my week was structured. So Monday was easy. Tuesday was a workout. Wednesday, medium long. So usually like hour 45 or so, single run on Wednesday. That's usually my shortest day of the week. Then Thursday, another workout. Friday, very easy. Saturday, workout. Sunday, long.
So no full rest day.
No, no. I mean, I was running 7 days a week.
Okay. Wow.
Wow. So something that comes up a lot on this podcast, I don't know if you've listened to any of our episodes, is strength training. We talk about it, and usually the criticism is leveled at me by our guests, the fact I don't do it. But I was curious for someone that runs this type of, at this level and this much, how much strength training are you putting in? Are you putting in any? Are you putting in more now that you're aging? Those sorts of things.
Oh, great one. So I got criticized a lot of, I work my upper body always. Like I never thought that should be neglected. So at minimum, doing push-ups, doing sit-ups, keeping just the foundational muscles of the things that keep you erect when you're running. Like, that is absolutely crucial. Planking. Um, to your point, now that I'm no longer as actively racing, I lift weights 7 days a week. I've just shifted to a new focus. So I'm up the heaviest I've ever been. So I mean, keep this all in perspective. My racing weight was between 125 and 130. I'm about 142 pounds right now. And it's a lot more on the upper body because I'll lift weights every day. I'll do push-ups. I'll do a lot more stuff than I used to. where it used to be supplemental to my running, now that can be a workout in and of itself. Now there are, to Chris's point about rest days, now there are rest days. That's a wonderful thing. And a rest day, I might, instead of running, I might take the kids out for a couple hour hike, or I might row for an hour. I love the rowing machine. That's my secondary workout tool, is to do something at home. Especially some of those nasty days in the winter. I've become a little more fair weather nowadays than I once was. Yeah, I used to go out when it was negative 25, and I'd be the guy out there layered and out running. Didn't matter if there was ice, I was on it. Now I'm like, yeah, getting hurt sucks a whole lot more now.
Takes a lot longer to get over the getting hurt these days, doesn't it?
Oh, you have no idea. So this might be TMI for this podcast, but I actually wound up. This is part of getting old. Is we get new problems, and for me, part of what, well, not part of what made me go deaf was actually I had Meniere's disease. So it started becoming active again, which means I have fluctuating hearing loss. So I will go through periods of vertigo, and I can't run for days at a time because I can't get off the couch for a couple of days at a time until the episode is over. Um, but also, as of Wednesday, I now get kidney stones. This is fun. So that's why I am drinking like crazy right now. Is I'm trying to pass one at the moment. So this is all part of the experience of getting old. That's all new to me.
Hey, you know what? It beats the alternative. There's only one alternative of getting old, and getting old is better than that. So
that's true. And that's still way better than my Leadville hemorrhoid story. So, you know.
Oh, man.
We all have our battle stories, though. That's the wonderful thing as we reach age.
I like that you got a South Cheatham Strider sticker there on the water bottle too. So yeah, representing still out there in Colorado. Very nice, very nice.
I got the dual sides here.
Oh, nice.
My Colorado, and I've got my South Cheatham.
So something I wanted to talk to you about, because you kind of helped us out a little bit with this, because my daughter's a ballet dancer, and she's actually kind of heading into that world next year. Next year is when she has to start looking for jobs in the ballet world. And yeah, I know, jobs as in they pay about like running. So
for listeners, we put jobs in air quotes. The nature of the industry.
Exactly. But she was going through some just stuff with her head, kind of mental toughness type things, and you actually at the time recommended a book called Psycho Cybernetics, I think, and actually Sophie read that book, and we all did, and we kind of took some of those strategies to heart. So I know that mental toughness is something that you're interested in and you've dealt with yourself. So what are your tips on kind of the mental toughness it takes to do these longer running events?
It's a lot of balance. So the thing I love about Psycho Cybernetics. So first off, if you haven't read it, listeners, read it. It's great. There's certain stuff in there that's a little dated, but some of it is the takeaways are great. So things like you often don't really know what the problem is that brought you to your problem. And that I really liked. And I think about that in running is you sometimes go to those dark places and you got to be able to pull yourself out. And I love that aspect of running. I love that aspect of life. Like we all go through those hills. We all go through the valleys. And coming down the hill is always a little bit more fun than going up it. But at the same time, it's because you had to go up it that going down is a little more fun. And I think to the point of mental toughness, if I had to do one thing over in my career, something I completely underinvested in is actually having a sports psychologist. I think more and more as I get older, I realize that was a neglected portion of especially the later part of my career when I think I was bitter, but at the same time, I couldn't capitalize on it because once you have blown up to a certain level, which for me was 2016 trial. It was arguably the worst race of my career. And I say that even having dropped out of my final race. Um, I I just was never the same after that race. And I think if I had gone through a sports psychologist and actually understood a little bit more about how to overcome my fear of going to that bad of a physical place again, I think I could have come back and had a much better second half of my career.
Hmm.
But don't neglect the psychology. And in my case, I had already referenced this. I always had great training partners. So we were one another's psychologists. But I don't think that's necessarily the best strategy. That was my strategy. And I think
Hmm.
we all could have elevated as a whole, as well as each other, if any of us had swallowed our pride and seen a sports psychologist.
That's an interesting. I think so. Kind of bring it back just to kind of the general listener out here that is entering races and maybe getting into racing to some degree and stuff like that. Do you have any strategies or anything like that to help them deal with some of that? I know, obviously seeing a sports psychiatrist is a great idea, but that might be beyond, just Joe Blow going out and running their first half marathon. So dealing with the race jitters and those sorts of things. What's some of your advice for those types of folks?
Embrace it. And honestly, practice going to dark places and coming back out. There's no value greater than that. You have to practice what you're going to do. So if you plan to go through three rough patches in a race, get yourself into a workout where you're going to go through those rough patches and see how you come out. And then take away after those workouts. Like you actually have to do a little bit of analysis afterward, self analysis and self evaluation. What was it that brought you out of that? Like, was there a mantra that you had? Like, I drop F bombs like it's my job when I'm running.
Hmm.
And, like there are certain things that I will say to myself, like, nobody's going to F and keep me down. No, this is running is not even a tangible. Intangible things can't break me. And just thinking those things get you over those bad places. So I think practice taking yourself there though, and practice whatever it is that gets you out. Think about your kids. Think about your dog. Think about you know chocolate milk at the end of a run. Whatever it is that gets you out of that dark place. All of those have worked for me at different points of time.
Yeah.
And what works today might not work tomorrow.
I'm kind of curious. I mean, I've been on, I do not a lot of marathons, but I do, 50 Ks, 50 miles, 100 milers, those kinds of distances. And that, and on top of that, I'm slow. So I've got lots of time to think about possibly everything I possibly can think about. You've got a lot less time to think than I do just by sheer speed and all. But so what's going through your mind on a race like the Chicago Marathon that you finished 10th place in? I mean, what was going through your mind during that race, or any of the or the London Marathon or the Olympic trials? Like what's are you just thinking about what you're going to buy at the grocery store tomorrow, or are you like repeating those mantras to yourself? I mean, where does your mind go?
Yes to all. I mean, you have times you need to be focused and you have times you need to just be going with the flow. Like flow is one of the most underrated things in running, in life, in work, is when you're in a flow, it's just a magical state.
Yes.
And yeah, I think we've all been in it in something in our lives at some point. But when you effortlessly are just doing everything you need to be doing because it's just working, everything clicks.
Mhm.
So, early on in a marathon, I'll use a marathon as an example, and I'll use London as an example because that was one of, I would say, my best races I ever ran. Um, Early on in the race, you're trying to establish. So you're making sure that you get to the position or get to the group that you need to be in. And from there, you need to sort of fall asleep a little bit. So at that point, yeah, you're still doing the systems assessments. You're still looking at, am I taking in enough hydration? How are my feet feeling? Am I getting too beat up around these curves? Do I need to take wider around the curves instead of staying at the closest tangent? How are you assessing those things? But in an ideal race, those things just fall into place. You aren't really actively thinking of them. They're just happening and they're happening in the background. And then you get to a point, like I remember at London, getting to a point where I'm coming down the home stretch, and I actually have a picture of London Marathon finish on my wall in my basement. Um, but coming down that finish, the only person for the last 5K or so that I was able to see coming through London was a guy named Patrick Rizzo, who was at that time the world record holder. There were four world record holders in that race, former or current. And I was like, man, I'm going to lose top Patrick billing. I'm going to lose to another Patrick. Damn it. I want to get my claw. And I'm just thinking, that's a big head to take. I use hunting references a little bit here, but like you want that head mounted on your wall. I wanted that head. And sometimes those are the motivations. Sometimes fear is a motivation, and it's a horrible one. Like you generally will run your worst when you're running off of fear. Like, am I about to get my head cut? Am I about to lose to somebody who doesn't deserve my head on their wall? So you're thinking about all those things.
I got a couple thoughts on that. First off, is yeah, the whole idea of a flow state is fantastic. Actually, last night I was running. It was like 65 degrees here in Tennessee at the end of May, which was fantastic. But you're on trails, you're out there, and and there's a point where like sometimes a run just feels like a total struggle, and you're pushing yourself through it, and it's horrible. But then there's those times, and last night was one of them, where you're just flying down the hills and there's rocks everywhere, places where I would normally like sprain my ankle, and I'm just flying over them, and you just feel it, and and sometimes you can even sit back and almost observe it, and you're thinking like, wow, my brain's an amazing thing. It's like watching all these things, and it's like preventing me from killing myself while I rapidly move through this terrain, which is just the best feeling you can have. I think it's what keeps us all coming back for more of it.
Well, how did the race go? How did the London Marathon go? Did you get his head or not?
Oh yeah.
I didn't get his head. I ran out of room.
Well, to be fair, he is a world record holder.
So here, fun little story of that finish at London. So I can't remember if it was William or Philip, one of the princes, was giving out the top British award. And I was the top non-East African in the race. So they assumed for some reason or another that I was British. I finish the race, they sweep me up, and they're like, all right, we've got to get you over to, by Buckingham Palace. The prince is going to give out the awards. I'm like, oh, cool. Why is the prince giving out the awards? Like, come again. They say something else like, he's not British. Get the next one.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know that white Brits are really likely to finish first in much of anything. I think darts. I think they still have darts. Other than that, I think they've pretty much been ejected from most of their conventional sports.
Yeah, I think you're correct on that.
Yeah, that's true. There's not many. Gosh, what was it the other day? I was listening to something, and I was watching a television show, and I looked it up. And you guys know what the number one like sport that folks from Mexico are best at, and they're the best in the world at?
Soccer?
Yeah, soccer is what pops into my mind.
Like the fastest race walkers in the world are from Mexico. Anyway, that's just a random thought about a sport I don't know where that was going, but so anyway, you're 40 now, and you're an aging elite, we can say. So what are your plans, Patrick, for the future? Now, I've been curious. I know that you were thinking at one point of taking a final stab at the Olympic trials, and just a lot of circumstances, I think, kind of stifled that dream. So, are there plans for running?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm kind of at that state where it's a giving back state. So I feel like to be an elite athlete, you kind of have to be selfish. There's no other way to do it. So I'm fortunate in that I got to be very selfish for very long in my life. That's why I delayed having kids, getting married, all that stuff. I was in a very selfish place. I feel like it's made me a much better person now because I wouldn't have been this same type of father as I am now if I had kids when I was in my 20s. I'd have been traveling all the time. I'd have been trying to pursue my own goals. I'd have been ignoring my kids, to be honest. So, it's now it's a point of giving back. It's a point of like last week, and I know this was something we were gonna talk about here, but
Yeah.
last week I ran Colfax Marathon, and I'm running it for a charity now. So I am on the board of directors for that event. I've been for I think 12 years now, 12, 13, somewhere in there. And we started up a new charity this year called Fly Feed. So what we do is we will provide free entries into our 5K, as well as any sort of resources needed for kids in the Denver metro area who are identified as at risk. So we will provide any of the resources they need. If they need a bus to get to the race, we will get them the bus. We have a budget allocated to that. So I wanted to raise money for that. So I started last in the Colfax Marathon last week and collected $1 toward the Fly Feet program for every person that I pass. So, not everybody starts at the same place at life. And I wanted to point out that, you can still make it pretty far up. You might not win, but you can pretty much make up ground, even if you don't start very far up in life. And that's exactly the demographic we're trying to go after. That's exactly what we want to demonstrate. So why not demonstrate it through my own actions?
Absolutely. How much did you raise?
It was about $5,900. It was just over 5,900.
Wow. And so you passed almost everybody.
Close.
I think I did the math and there were like 6,000 some people. I think you came in 128th out of 6,000 starting dead last, right? Did you start a few minutes behind everyone or was it just dead last?
Well, it's a wave start. So
Yep.
I was in the 26th wave. So I started 26 minutes after the actual gun start.
Right.
I was in the
Nice.
Z wave alphabetically. And I made sure that the last person crossed that start line before I started.
Very good. Yeah, that's great. So the only other place I've seen that done is they do that at Leadville too. They have a guy that starts like 2 hours after everybody, and then he goes through and everybody he passes. I think, and that's actually not a bad idea for you guys. They actually have people pledge money for that for everybody that they pass. You could do that next year and probably raise that even more. So um,
That's exactly what the goal is.
At Pittsburgh a few weeks ago, I also almost started dead last, but that was actually based on my target time and the corral they put me in, not any kind of fundraising thing. That's just my natural speed, last. So
born to be naturally last.
that's
So
right. We'll get there when we get there.
So you're giving back. You're looking to, but are you setting any new goals for yourself? Are you setting new performance goals for yourself? Like I think that's something we have to kind of all do is reimagine ourselves to some degree. Obviously, like I am not going to win a 100-mile race probably unless I just get incredibly lucky and people get a lot injured in front of me. But like my goal this year is I'm going to try to run the race I ran last year in 24 hours. So how are you redefining your goals with your age? Do you still have things you want to accomplish with running or with athletics in any way?
I've turned the page on wanting to get personal bests, but I do have other ways that I want to measure myself. So, you and I have talked on runs about me moving more toward trails and that sort of thing. And I'll still go have fun with it. Like I will still run races that make sense for me to run. So Colfax is always going to be a passion of mine. I'll run that every year. I will also probably run one or two more marathons a year just to do things for charity. And I want to make sure I'm setting the bar high for those. So if, this is something now I have a benchmark for Colfax. is next year I want to get 6,000. I want to get that next target. So I didn't stop setting goals. I changed what those goals are. And I think now measuring myself by the clock would be a fool's errand. And I've just done that for too long where it would be too mentally exhausting for me. But what I can do is find different ways to measure myself. So, whether that is how much I can raise for a charity doing it, or whether that is, can I get somebody who didn't love running into it in a way that's positive and change their life? That's more of what I want to do, is see how I can impact this for others.
No, I really like that. As you know, I mean, that's a passion of mine too. Is just getting people out doing something.
Absolutely.
And the easiest thing you can do is
Absolutely.
put on some sneakers and go out and start walking, crawling, doing whatever you can do, and working up to that running. And I think that's excellent. Um, that said, yeah, we have talked about the trails before, and Patrick, I believe you've only run one trail race ever, in which I think you came in second, right? I mean, it was Silver Dollar, I believe, out at Leadville.
Third.
Third.
Wow.
Um, yeah, but you only got a little bit, like a few miles lost off the trail or something too, something like that, right?
Wait, you placed third after getting lost?
Yes. Yes. So this was Silver Rush 50 miler in Leadville. I did this kind of on a whim. So this is the cockiness of a road runner versus a trail runner. Those like these guys they're old and slow, so I can come out here and just dominate this thing. And it was totally stupid on my part because I had actually thought I was going to retire after the 2016 trial. So I had run 4 marathons in I think it was 7 weeks, something like that. And Leadville was about 2 months after the fourth. So it's like, you know what? What's a 50 miler? Basically a marathon, right? It's on trails, it's soft surface. Well, it turned out it was the hottest day in Leadville. So it was about 89 degrees at
That's hot.
10,000 feet. Oh,
Ooh,
it was hot. I was burning through fluid like you wouldn't believe.
it's hard to
But
breathe.
it it is because you're already in the thinner air, and when it's hotter, it just exacerbates it. But I made some mistakes. I apparently lost a flag at some point and went straight downhill for 2 miles where I should have turned. So then I had to come back uphill for those 2 miles, which there were a lot of words that rhymed with duck and ducking. But yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's my only ultra up to this point. Well, I have run a couple of other trail races. I ran a couple of trail races in Nebraska as well.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, that's where I was kind of going with this is, trail runners. Yeah, we're all, I mean, the guys that are performing at the top of their game right now are pretty old. I mean, even Jim Walmsley, what, he's 36 now, and
None of them are in their
he just
20s.
yeah, he's crushing UTMB and Western States. I mean, 14-hour Western States probably this summer. So,
Wow.
uh, it seems like a transition for you. You ever think about doing that, making that transition to trying some trail, and you're in the perfect place to do it on top of that.
I was about to say.
I've thought about it and it's not off the table. The question is, how much am I willing to commit my time again to it? And I know I'm, like I said, not very talented. I'm very competitive. So I would need to get more people that I'm training with that are doing the trail stuff that, I'm just looking to kick their butt on any given day. And I want them to be thinking the exact same thing about me. And it perpetuates into elevating one another. We always had this statement in college, I'll take care of me for you if you take care of you for me. And
That's good.
it was keeping accountable, but at the same time, I'm not afraid to break you today, but it's for your good and for mine. And I want you to do the same thing for me. If I am being a pansy out here, if I'm not pulling my weight, you owe it to me to drop me.
No, that's excellent.
Yeah.
I am fortunate enough that on our runs, you just always stayed back and ran slow with me and kept it. What I will say about Patrick is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, it was one of the first things I ever noticed about the way you run is I'm sitting there, just huffing and puffing around Montgomery Bell or whatever we were doing that first time. Nothing's happening, just, like running. And I look down at his feet and his turnover is still like insanely fast. So, and of course, like I'm just like, trying to survive. So what, am I correct? Was I watching the right thing? So you maintain that same turnover on your feet almost all the time, no matter what speed you're going, it seems like.
You're not wrong on that. Now, I've never really paid too terribly much attention to it, but you're absolutely right. Like as I run faster, I just open up my stride. That's really the biggest difference. But as you also probably noticed, I have all of the softness of an elephant when I'm landing. So, I don't exactly have a soft, gentle stride. Holding conversation over my running is a high volume,
Yeah,
and not
that's
just because of my deafness.
Oh, yeah. It's not that bad. The funny story, of course, is the first time that Patrick and I ever ran was because he sought me out. And you did it kind of persistently. At first it was online, and then you showed up at my garage sale and said, "Hey, let's go running." And so we did. I think the next day we were out on the trails running. But the whole reason why I didn't is I'd been looking at you on Strava and I was like, this guy, he doesn't want to run with me. Like I'm looking at those like, 5-minute splits and I'm like, nah. So um so I guess the next thing I'd like to kind of move on to is, you've gotten to run, we talked a little bit about this when you were, but you've gotten to run with all these quite famed runners, and I believe from previous conversations, even within the trail world, you know Tony or Tommy Ribs, who's popular runner for obviously the tremendous kind of disease he's been overcoming and the way he's gone about it and everything like that. But then also you've run with Kipchoge. I mean, these names that we all hear. What are these guys like, and who what's competing with them and interacting with them like?
Tommy is one of the nicest guys. So, but I don't think I've ever told Tommy this story, but him and I roomed together at, I believe it was Chicago 2018. We got roomed together, and I was thinking, who is this pretty boy douchebag Instagram model dude that I am rooming with? And he turned out to be like the nicest guy ever. And we actually became friends. I really liked Tommy, like got to know him, his brother. Great dude. Totally genuinely nice person. I have had very few people. I could probably name two, and I won't give their names. Two people I have ever disliked in the running world because I felt like they could not swallow their ego or they didn't know what level they were really at versus reality. Like they felt that they were somewhere they weren't, and
Mhm.
that just does not portray well in the running world. So I think I've ever had two negative interactions with another runner, but Kipchoge I never really got close with whatsoever. Meb, another guy that's just genuinely a great guy. I've traveled with him dozens of times. Just one of the nicest people. Um, on the women's side, I'm going to give a little plug here to a friend of mine, Sarah Crouch. Super, super nice woman. She just published a book that we just read in my book club. It's a book called Middle Tide. Absolutely fantastic book. But like these are some of the absolutely most genuinely nice people that I've ever met.
It's awesome.
And like I said, I can isolate two that were either phony or total turds.
Yeah. And I think that's something I like about the running world in general. And it's good to hear that it goes all the way to the top. It's just, there are always those people that you don't like, or that are like that. But for the main part, it's just it's such a good, like, runners get together and they usually get along. It's just, and it brings people together regardless of, I mean, we live in this very heated, politically divided world, and like you can go to your run group and we just that is how you're just out running with friends and you make friends, and it's a good camaraderie that
A
comes
lot of
from it.
camaraderie. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. And running doesn't have to be competitive. I mean, obviously, for someone like you, it is competitive. But at the same time, if I run a good race, my best race, I'm never going to finish first in anything. But if I run a good race, I feel a victory in that, even if I was, even if there were 1,000 people that finished ahead of me, you know what? I kicked ass. I ran, maybe one of these days I'll get a sub 4 marathon, and like I'll feel like $1 million walking off that, even though somebody like you has already finished lunch and you're back at the hotel taking a shower. I don't have to lose for you to win, and I like that. I
I
like
think
that.
no, I think that's a perfect point. Is there is no finite amount of success in running, and that both the blessing and the curse of running is your success doesn't detract from mine. So, but that said, some of the greatest feelings of success I've had are when I help somebody else run a personal best. Like those are some of the days that I have walked away feeling the absolute best about what I did that day in that race. So I think you have a great point of, let's say we had right about 25,000 people at Colfax Marathon last week. Listen, I think probably half had a good race, just given statistics.
Right.
So, but that said, that's amazing. You had 12,000 people that had a positive experience in the same day. So, how amazing is that? You can't have that in other sports. You just don't get that same opportunity
It's not
to
the same.
elevate the entire platform of the sport. So, that's something I absolutely love.
Yeah. No, I think it's great, and it kind of leads into my last question, and it's what I kind of ask everybody on our as a last question on our podcast, and it's specific to what you do, but I mean it's just the basic question. It's the why you do it, because we all go out and obviously something drives every one of us that decides to go out and do these endurance type events to do it and keep on coming back for more and more of it. And I mean, to me, it's almost a spiritual experience, and maybe it is or it isn't for you. But I mean, what is your why for doing this?
Physically and mentally, I'm afraid of getting soft. I'm afraid of getting physically soft. I am so terrified that the day I stop running, it's going to be like somebody pulled a ripcord on an emergency exit on a plane. Like I'm just going to inflate, and I'm going to be that guy that people point to walking down the street. It, I am terrified of getting physically soft, and I'm also terrified of becoming mentally soft, like becoming complicit with anything in my life. I don't like complacency. I always want to have a goal. I always want to be working towards something, and running keeps me there. Running has also been a huge source of how I problem solve. I can get my brain to go to some places in running that I can't get it to go outside of that. So, I might be working through a complex customer problem, and I'm like, how can I get them through this and get them to a solution? And I could sit at my desk all day and I can't come up with any resolution. But if I go out for an hour run, I have somehow unlocked this section of my brain that I can't do when I'm sitting by a computer screen. I can actually problem solve on a much deeper level when I'm not with the problem. And I think there's just so much to that. And there's a lot of actual research to that too, that shows that physical exercise is actually good for your mental stimulation. And I think
Absolutely.
that's something so crucial. I know, Tony, you have had such a great mission down in Kingston Springs of wanting to bring health benefits to the entire community. You know, whether that's the running with the mayor, whether that's the run club, all these small things that make a huge impact. I mean, heart disease is the number one killer. That should not be the case. This is preventable.
Yeah.
We all can do better for ourselves, for our kids, for our community. And you just think about what the untapped human potential is because others won't exercise. And that's something I always think about is, man, if this person who's struggling with X, Y, or Z would just see these small benefits little by little, inch by inch of exercising,
Yeah.
it's not going to come in a day. It's not going to come in a week. It might not even come in a month or a year. But those long-term benefits, mentally, physically, emotionally, I think we would see a decrease in not only heart disease, but depression, all
Absolutely.
sorts of things. That's just so, it's sad to see that it's not at a place where we're all doing this.
I think that this country, especially now, has kind of a epidemic of anxiety too. And that is something that I will say, like, I mean, I get anxiety. I think we all get anxiety, and I think part of it's just
Sure.
the culture, the general culture we're in. It's technology, it's all those things. I can't think of a single time I've ever been anxious on a run. Actually, I was even thinking about running a 100 miler, and I always talk about like, oh, you experience all the feelings in a day, but the one feeling you don't experience running 100 miles is anxiety. Like, there's just it's not there. And maybe at the beginning of the race, there's a little anxiety because you're about to start at a starting line. But, a mile into that, that's gone. Like there's no room in your brain for necessarily having anxiety. You're using your body to its fullest. And that's basically that pent up energy that you have is being released. So that's like when you talk about how you can think about things, it's like your brain is now freed up to like quit like micromanaging all those things, and you can focus on something because you're moving, I guess. And that just all came
Absolutely.
off the top of my head and maybe didn't make sense, but
Oh no, it made perfect sense. We a lot of people are on all these medications for their mental health, and in some cases that's absolutely beneficial and helpful. But everything I've read has said that going for a run in the woods for many people can be absolutely just as effective as the medication, and you get all these other benefits. You reduce blood pressure, reduce BMI, better metabolic health, longer health span, longer lifespan. So it's all connected, and I think that that's a really an important lesson.
Well, and I think another thing, without dragging this out another half hour, another thing that does keep that anxiety off of you while you're running too is keep your technology at home. Get
Sure.
out there. I don't care if you're walking. I don't care if you're running. I don't care if you're lifting weights. Have some point in your day where your technology is off of you and away from you. Like, unless you are the guy delivering defibrillators to a hospital, you're probably not life or death to what you're going to do in that half
Sure.
hour to an hour that you're working out. So it's important to have that. And I think that is a huge driver of the anxiety. And I think, to your point, that is, you said you get a little anxious at the start of a race, but I don't think that's actually the right emotion. I think it's actually, you get
excitement.
that nervous jitter of excitement.
Anticipation.
Like, yes, it's
Yeah.
anticipation. Thank you for, I was struggling for the word,
Absolutely.
but it's anticipation. And it's also one of the reasons I think running is so satisfying, or sport is so satisfying,
Hmm.
is it's one thing in our lives we can ultimately control.
Sure.
Like, a lot of people can't control the stability of their job or the workflow of their work, or if their kids come home on
Right.
time or 10 minutes late, or any of those things. But it's so within our control. And I think we all strive, like, we're dying to have control back in our day, especially in the post COVID world where it feels like we're all working 24 hours a day.
And you can build something too. Kind of playing off that, you're actually building something that and it's you. You're building you on top of that. You're not, so like, so many jobs people have now seem like, like they're just cogs and they're not really producing anything tangible or anything like that. And I think that there's a human need to produce something. And even if that something is just producing a better you, running, biking, swimming, sports in general, that's the way you can actually like you can build something that is all yours. And it's, that's a lot
Yeah.
of magic that comes from doing that, I think. So
A lot of days work feels like I'm just turning big rocks into small rocks, and it's a lot more satisfying to get a really good run in. So,
exactly. Well,
Well, thanks for
Patrick,
joining us today. I
yeah,
appreciate your time.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for coming. This
No,
is
thank you
coming on the
guys.
show. Yeah,
Thank
I'll
you
have
guys for
to.
inviting me. I hope everybody got something out of this, and don't
Absolutely.
hesitate to reach out if you guys have any follow-up questions or if you ever want to chat.
Sure.
I'm always happy to help people.
That's great.
Anybody who
And we
wants to
will
get better at anything, I'm always willing to help you do it.
And we'll link to those books that you discussed. We'll link to those on the website. That is fitafter40.net. In the blog, we'll have those books posted if anybody's interested in reading further.
That sounds good. And yeah, next time when I'm in Colorado, I'll give you a call. If I don't, I'll have to check on the trip and see if there's maybe a point we can meet up and grab lunch or something, or maybe a quick run. So
I'll make it a point.
we'll do it. All right. Thanks.